Hello, everyone. We are here today talking about Indigenous sport.
Our initial thoughts for the topic, Indigenous sports, were that it was going to be less in depth than it actually was. We went further and behind the scenes of Indigenous sporting life and saw what it was really like. At the beginning, we thought this wasn't going to be as big of a pressing issue and believed there was more change happening. Two things that were new to us were how important it is to identify Indigenous people using the correct terminology and the games that are played in their culture. Indigenous sports such as finger pull, stick pull, blanket toss, and hand games were very interesting and different compared to anything we've played before. How to identify Indigenous people was especially new to us because there are many terms that are determined to be racist or wrong that may not seem that way on the surface. As a group, we didn't bring much experience to the topic, other than learning a little bit here and there from high school and the news. We knew about the controversy surrounding professional sports teams such as the Cleveland Indians, Chicago Blackhawks, and the Washington NFL team, as well as the lack of Indigenous athletes that have broken through and made it to the highest stage possible. What surprised us was the learning curve for the Indigenous sports at the experience. They took a great deal of coordination, teamwork, and effort to get good at and even just learn. We found that stick pull was one of, if not the most difficult. What also surprised us was just how little funding and support Indigenous sport in Canada gets. We also found that the lack of funding and support is difficult for us to wrap our heads around, especially in Canada, where Indigenous people are very prevalent but not appreciated and worth the same as other citizens.
So now on to critical thinking for Indigenous sport. So one thing that challenged us, a couple of things that challenged us was when we got the chance to participate in some of the Indigenous games. It gave us a better understanding of the Indigenous culture. As Cody mentioned before about the stickful, it was surprising but also found it difficult to play. We didn't know going in that there would be Vaseline on the stick, but it proved to make the game a lot more challenging for me and my opponent. Now on to some of the questions we still have about Indigenous sport. A couple of questions we have in regards concerns professional teams. As you are aware, there are some professional sport teams that take on names of their team that can be discriminatory or offensive towards the Indigenous culture. Some of these professional sport teams include the Chicago Blackhawks, the Edmonton Eskimos, the Cleveland Indians, and the NFL team in Washington. Our question here is that will there be any changes to these professional sport teams changing their names because it has created problems and Indigenous people find it to be offensive? We know as of right now there are some changes in the works, but as it goes on, will there ever be a change? Because right now the names still being what they are, it tells us that they are fine with the team names and that they don't want to make an effort in changing it. An area of this topic we would like to know more about is the opportunity young Indigenous athletes get to participate in sport. We know that because of the funding and areas that Indigenous people live in, it could be challenging for them to start leagues or tournaments. But it would be interesting to learn more about creating an opportunity for them.
Now, on to future forward. When it comes to Indigenous culture, there are a lot of ways you could do to disrespect the culture without knowing it. With having this acknowledgement, it will help you to not make these mistakes. This can cause a problem for the organization and for yourself. These potential mistakes can end up making a bad image for you and the organization, loss in sales, loss in fans, and many more. Your consumers are what matter most to you, and you wouldn't want to lose them because they are what keep your organization moving forward. With that, it is also great to know that if you are a person that likes Indigenous sport, there are tons of opportunities available. This is great because if you love Indigenous sport, then it is great to know that there are opportunities out there for you. As well, that if you want to explore and see what's out there, it gives you a chance to put your foot in the door and start your career. This is the end of Indigenous sport, In our next video, we will talk about parasport. Thank you all for listening about Indigenous sport.